Bon dia and welcome to the second lesson of the beginner level for the series Catalan from scratch. In this lesson, we will go over the personal pronouns in Catalan, specifically the strong ones. I will explain what this means. And yeah, let's just start. But first, let's review the solutions from last lesson's exercise. If you remember, on the last lessons, we were looking at the articles, definite, indefinite, and the personal ones. And I left you some sentences that you had to complete. So these are the solutions. As you can see, we have the blanks that you have to fill in red color. So check that everything is correct. If you have any doubts, please let me know. Now I will read it to you so that you know how it sounds and how you should pronounce it. But yeah, this is basically it for the solutions. So, l'Aina mira els gats. Un lleó juga amb unes zebres. En or el Carles vol els videojocs. Les dones demanen una sopa. That's it. So now let's start with the lesson. So we have two main types of pronouns to cover. The first type is the subject. So just like in English, you need pronouns to define which is the subject, who is conducting the action, who's performing that action. So for example, in English, you would use the pronouns I, you, he, she, or it. We have another type, which are pronouns that you use after prepositions. In English, you would use, for example, me, us, or them. So for personal pronouns used for subjects, you have categories for person and for number. For the first person, in singular, you use jo. This is the equivalent of I in English. So if you want to say I see, you say jo veig. If you want to say I arrive, you say jo arribo. For plural, you say nosaltres. Nosaltres veiem, nosaltres arribem. For the second person, that is, if you are talking to someone directly and you refer to that person directly, you use tu or vostè. The difference between these two pronouns is that vostè is more formal. It is still used and you use it with older people or customers or people that you want to show respect. Tu veus, vostè arriba. For the plural, you say vosaltres and vostès, which is also the formal format or the formal way to use the personal pronoun for the second person. Vosaltres veieu, vostès arribeu. And finally, for the third person and singular form, you say ell or ella. Ell, when you want to say he, when you refer to a male, and ella when you want to say she, therefore a female. Ell, ella veu, ell, ella arriba. And for the plural, it's pretty simple. You just add an S for the masculine, and for feminine, you end the word with ES. Ells, elles. Ells veuen or elles veuen. So a couple notes that I wanted to address. Maybe you are thinking about this, you were having some doubts. If you're asking yourself why you didn't see any it pronoun, it does exist. So in the third person, there is a subject for things and not just people. However, there isn't a unique pronoun for this. You use demonstrative determiners for each case. For example, in English, you would use these, those, that, or this. But in Catalan, you don't have an it pronoun. Instead, you use these demonstrative determinants, so it depends on the case. That is why you don't see them in the table. We will see these determiners in future lessons, so don't worry about that for now. Just learn this once, and you will see how it makes sense when we get there. Secondly, as you know, in English, every time you use a verb, or most of the time, you have to specify who is the subject. Is it I? Is it you? Is it us? Or we rather? Is it he, she? But in Catalan, you don't really need this most of the time. Why? Because conjugation of the verb already tells you who is the subject. When I conjugate a verb, I'm already saying if I am the one performing the action, or is it you, or is it them, etc. However, there are some cases in which you use the personal pronoun before the verb, especially if you want to specify or emphasize who is the subject. For example, if someone asks who wants the cake, and there's a group of people and you know you want it, maybe you say I want the cake, and you use the personal pronoun in Catalan to specify that you, specifically you, want the cake. You find this quite often, like there are some cases it's not uncommon to use personal pronoun, but as a rule of thumb, you don't really use it before verbs. Okay, so now let's see the personal pronouns that you use after a preposition. It's important, therefore, to know what a preposition is, and there is a list of prepositions in Catalan that we will also see in the future. But for now, just think about the translation in English. When you say me in English, generally, you also pronounce it me in Catalan. So, a mi in Catalan would mean to me, when something is done to me or given to me. Also, per mi. This is for the first person in singular, by the way. Per mi, for me. You're doing something for me. In plural, you don't change the pronoun in respect to the subject form, so you also say nosaltres. A nosaltres, to us, and per nosaltres, for us. In the rest of the cases, it's exactly the same. You don't change it in respect to the personal pronoun for the subject. So for the second person singular, you say tu and vostè, a tu per vostè. And for the plural, you say vosaltres and vostès, a vosaltres per vostès. For the third person, same thing, ell and ella, and ells and elles. Instead of saying them, which in English doesn't depend on the gender, you always say them. For third person plural in Catalan, you have to separate. You have to distinguish which is the gender. So if it's a masculine group, you say ells. If it's feminine, you say ellas. So I mentioned that these pronouns are strong. So what does it mean? It basically means that they are stressed. The way that you pronounce them are stressed. If you notice, I've been saying jo, tu, ells, elles, vosaltres, nosaltres. They all have a stressed syllable. This distinction is made because in Catalan we have something called the feeble pronouns, els pronoms febles, which are unstressed. You don't stress these pronouns. But unfortunately, this is a topic that we are not going to cover at the beginner level because it's pretty advanced. If some of you are watching but already know about the feeble pronouns, you know what I'm talking about. They are quite complex, they can be quite complex, and it's one of those milestones when learning Catalan. So if you can master them, congratulations, because not even native speakers can master them in most cases. So you will have to wait until maybe the intermediate level or the advanced level in order to see what these are about. But if you want me to explain you, maybe you can contact me. That's not a problem. So finally, some examples for you to see these applied in actual sentences. La Mireia compra un pastís per mi. Mireia buys a cake for me. As you can see, in this case, the preposition is per, which in English would translate it most of the cases with for, because the action is performed on me. In this case, me is the indirect object. So you use a preposition before this pronoun, and thus you use the second type of pronoun that I explained. La Mireia compra un pastís per mi. Second example, entre elles hi ha una casa. Entre is a preposition which means between. So in English you would say them, and since it is a group of female, you say elles. No tinc res contra vosaltres. I have nothing against you. Contra, again, is a preposition. So after this preposition, you use the personal pronoun. Contra vosaltres, contra vostres, against you, in plural. As you can see in this sentence, in English, you say I have nothing against you. You specify the subject. But in Catalan, you don't see the subject before the verb. The verb in Catalan in this case is tinc. Tinc is a conjugation for the verb to have, but is a conjugation for the first person. So I don't need to say jo tinc because it is implicit in the conjugation. However, in English, like I said, you need to specify. And yes, as you can see, the pronoun after the preposition is in plural and second person, vosaltres. What if you wanted to say you but in singular? Then instead of using vosaltres, use the pronoun for the second person singular, which is tu and vostè. No tinc res contra tu. No tinc res contra vostè. I have nothing against you in singular. So the rest of the sentence remains the same, but you're only changing the pronoun because it needs to be coherent with the number. So we've seen also new vocabulary in this lesson. We can go over it. As you can see, the new verbs are always in the infinitive form because it's like a default form that we use. So we have seen the verb veure, which is to see. Arribar, which is to arrive or to get somewhere. Arrive sounds pretty formal in English, but in Catalan you also use it casually to say to get somewhere. El verb comprar, which is to buy. Casa means house, casa. Res means nothing. Pastís for cake, and also in infinitive tenir, to have. And just like in the previous lesson, this is another set of exercises that you can complete. If you have questions, ask me. In the next video, you will have the solutions just like I showed at the beginning of the video. You will have to use both personal pronouns for the subject and personal pronouns after the prepositions. As an advice, maybe you can try to identify where are the prepositions so that you know that after those you will have to use personal pronouns for prepositions, and next to verbs usually you will have to use personal pronouns for specifying the subject. That's it. I hope that was helpful. I hope that you learned something. If you need to ask anything, leave a question in the comments. You can send me an email. And that is it for this lesson. Adeu-siau.